The last type of loop that is recognized by C# is the while loop. While loops are very similar to for loops, but use a slightly different syntax. While syntax can be easier to understand than for syntax in some cases, but while loops are more prone to errors due to their more permissive syntax. You'll create a while loop in this lesson and see the difference between the two. To begin, open the My Project sample file from your Sample Files folder. And open calculatorfunctions.cs. Now you're going to modify the addToNumbers method to use a while loop instead of a for loop. Remove all of the code from the addToNumbers method and add the following code. Int number of numbers equals numbers.count. This is the same code that you used for your for loop. You need to know how many items are in the collection to know how many times you will need to loop. Now add the following code on the next line. Int counter equals 0. You're going to use counter as the iteration variable for your while loop. Unlike the for loop, you need to define the iteration variable for a while loop on a separate line. This makes while loops more appropriate if you already have a variable defined that you would like to use as the iteration variable. Now add the following code on the next line. While counter is less than number of numbers. Begin curly brackets, end curly brackets. This code defines the while loop and specifies that it will loop as long as the value of counter is less than the value of number of numbers. Now add the following code inside the while loop. Numbers counter equals numbers counter plus amount to add. This is the same code that you used in your for loop in lesson 8.4. It will add the value of amount to add to each item in the numbers collection. If you didn't add any more code, this loop would run forever, because the value of counter will never increase. The loop would eventually crash when the value of the first item in the numbers collection exceeded the limitations of the int type. To complete this code, you need to add some code that will increase the counter by 1 at the end of every loop. Add the following code on the next line inside the while loop. Counter plus plus. Your while loop is now complete. The while loop requires more code and has more scope for error than the for loop, but it is also easier to integrate with existing variables and can be easier to understand. The for loop is almost always best when looping through collections, but the while loop can be better for other code that you need to loop through several times. Now you're going to test your code on the calculator.aspx page. View calculator.aspx in your browser and click the second button. The correct result of 194 is displayed. This proves that your while loop is working in exactly the same way as the for loop that you created in the previous lesson. Close your web browser now and close Visual Studio. You've now completed Lesson 8.5. Iterate through a collection using a while loop.